Welcome to Profile 3 TV, and today I'm super excited to be joined by Eileen Walsh, and we're going to talk about Share My Legacy. So Eileen, over to you. It's great to be connected finally, and as I say, if you don't mind introducing yourself to everyone that's watching and tell us who you are and a little bit about your history.
Thank you so much, Karen. So yes, Eileen Walsh. I live in Chicago, Illinois. I've been here for almost 30 years, but I grew up in Ireland. I grew up in County Derry, way in the country. I came to the United States in 1989. My gosh, it seems like yesterday in some ways, another lifetime. But I actually came on one of the Across the Barricades programs at the time that were available because of that particular situation we had in the North at that time. And I came to Chicago, and I truly, it's almost like a cliche. I just saw a whole other world. I saw opportunity for me that I did not see in Ireland, and I really flourished there. I came back as soon as I could. I finished up my degree, which I had started at Queen's in Belfast here at DePaul, and then I went to Loyola Law School and really just went out after everything that I believed that I could achieve. Now, when I started in law, I was a public defender to begin with. You know, that's defending the indigent. And I think maybe a little bit of that came from my experience of growing up in Northern Ireland and kind of having a real feeling of sort of defending the underdog. And it was a wonderful experience for a few years. I got a lot of litigation, really learned how to speak on my feet, got comfortable in court. But there was always something about the adversarial system that didn't sit right with me. I went out into private practice. I discovered estate planning, wills and trusts, and there I find my home. I love this area of law. I have my own practice for over 20 years now. And there is there's something about sitting with people in order to do their will, to do their trust. I have to know about their life, their money, their family, any problems, any skeletons in the cupboard. And in doing that and working with people that way, you know, I learn their stories. So that kind of ties to the Share My Legacy. I have a point here. Stay with me. I read a bar article one time that divided lawyers into warriors and healers. And I thought, that's why I didn't belong in litigation. I'm not a warrior, I'm a healer. And that's what I do with my estate planning, helping people settle their estate, figure out the family issues, try to get family harmony, weave that into the estate plan. And it was in doing estate planning that I realized that people had so much story to tell. And Karen, I've always had a soft spot for story. Growing up in Ireland, even though it was only 50 something years ago, it sounds like 100 because we were way in the country. We didn't have electricity, phone. There were 12 of us, plus my parents, plus my great aunt. So it was that old fashioned extended family fire. We had turf fires and oil lamps, if you can believe it. And my parents telling stories, my grandfather, my father smoking his pipe. It truly was an environment where we listened to them talk about the wars and talk about the ghosts and talk about the fairy rings, all the things that just seemed so natural growing up. And we wouldn't have dreamt of interrupting. We were transfixed. So I came from that appreciation of story. Here I am sitting in the conference room with my clients as they tell their stories, their immigration stories, where they came from, how they built their businesses, what they built, what they lost, what they came through. And of course, their legal needs unfolded through those stories, and stories don't belong in legal documents. So there is where I first got the interest in somehow preserving those stories. And I discovered this ancient tradition of an ethical will. It predates the Bible. It started with the Jewish patriarch telling the family on his deathbed what they should do with the family money and the family business, how it was earned, and how, hence the ethical, how they should behave with the family fortune. But it grew, it came away from the male tradition, it came away from the religious tradition, and has survived as a way to leave a legacy beyond the possessions. I like to say you leave your wisdom as well as your wealth. So when I discovered the tradition, I knew it was exactly what I wanted to incorporate into my practice. So I began teaching my clients to write an ethical will. I didn't find one good way how to do it. People get bogged down in their story, they get overwhelmed. So I developed my own program. I developed a program to help them write this letter effortlessly, break it down into different sections, help them meander through it without getting lost, without getting overwhelmed. And really, truly, it has just maybe been my opus magnum, if I may. It's of everything that I have achieved, it's what I am most proud of. And I've been teaching ethical wills since 2006. I've developed this program over the last few years, which is now an online course beyond my practice. It's a series of video tutorials, as well as a beautiful workbook full of prompts and samples and suggestions and quotes. It's just lovely, Kieran. And anyone who offers themselves to this takes a look, sits down, looks at their life, thinks about its value, even the difficult things, maybe even the most difficult things where they learned the most and what they have to teach children and grandchildren. They realize a value beyond any physical material they might have to leave. And because I do estate planning, people will say to me, oh, I have nothing to leave. And I always say, oh, yes, you have. Your story, and especially, Karen, someone who may have dedicated their life to service, to mission, to not building a personal fortune. They have such great stories and such a value to leave those coming after them. And then the ultimate prize of this process is you sit down to write it for someone else, and the greatest beneficiary is yourself, because the reflection is transformative.
Incredible. No, it's amazing. So what's the main difference then between an ordinary will and an ethical will? Is the focus on not just the physical and the money aspect?
Right. So a legal will is where you determine who will get what you have and who will be in charge, right? That's something that, you're the captain of that ship. But a legal will is probably, of all the legal documents, it's one that is most strictly construed. And so let me just tell you this about wills. We learn in law school that if it's not in the will, even 50 bishops swearing on a Bible that they knew that's what that person's intention was, if it's not in the will, it's not adhered to. And that's because we will not have the will maker at the time that we're trying to determine what was in the will. So it's not about intention. We have very strict laws as to writing wills, because we're never going to have the will maker when there is going to be a contest. So strictly construed, strictly how they're written, how they're signed, how they're witnesses, the language. So and that's ancient, that's hundreds of years also. And interestingly, Kieran, our American law, as with many colonized countries, comes from the 10th century British law. So there's an incredible uniformity with many of our documents in property law, and particularly wills. Some of it really hasn't changed that much in centuries. So a will is a very formal document. So I take that very seriously, as does everyone in my profession. So you don't mess with the formula. And people have this idea when they hear films and people sit around the table and someone is, they're throwing arrows and this is the reason why somebody isn't getting something. That doesn't happen. We don't put that kind of language in wills. So family stories do not belong in legal wills. So the ethical will is where we tell the stories, where we leave the lessons. We stick to the law for the legal will. That's where we leave the land, the home, the jewels, the money, and then the real jewels your family stories and what you have to teach are in the legacy letter, this modern incarnation of the ethical will.
And the ethical will then is something that has been around then for a long time, but maybe has been forgotten. Then people forget the value of the stories.
Absolutely. And Kieran, if I had one mission with my legacy letter, it would be truly to bring an ancient tradition and a very marginal tradition into the mainstream. I just think it would be wonderful if everyone, and maybe not even everyone, Kieran, you'd be shocked at how many people don't do their will. It's probably not even 60% of people who do estate planning or who do adequate planning. But at least people know they should do it well, even if they don't. They're aware of that, how important that is. The people, it would only be like a very, very small percentage of people who would know about a legacy letter, an ethical will, and about writing one. So it would be my mission to bring the tradition, the idea to the mainstream, and that everyone would know the value of their life and what they have to live. And I think it's a shame that most people spend their life caring about others. They spend their life consuming reality stars, and now with TikTok, I mean, it's just like round the clock with influencers, not realizing that they themselves have a far more valuable story for their family, their own flesh and blood. And I think that if we left our lessons and didn't, and even secrets, Kieran, and the difficult things and the babies that no one knew about, and if we wrote about those things and didn't keep up the front, not just leave a Valentine, we could save some young 16-year-old girl's life who feels that she has invented the problem and has no clue that maybe her own grandmother went through that very same situation. If we had this tradition, I believe we could do so much with it. And indeed, it's been said that for anyone, if you were, and Kieran, let me ask you this, if you, in your great-grandfather's old cottage, they were to find in the attic an old war bond that was maybe worth 20,000, or a letter about your great-grandfather's life, which would you choose?
Amazing. It'd be the letter. I'm just actually thinking as you're talking, like I sadly don't have any grandparents now, and again, they live to a good age, but as you say, like just knowing or them sharing a little bit of their life, like their friends, what they did, I think it'd be incredible just to read, and even for me to pass on to my children now as well. So you definitely get me thinking about that, as opposed to the money, any money comes and goes and it's done, but actually the lessons and the history and the stories and what they've done, again, it's sadly forgotten, and I guess this is a chance to stop that. So very interesting. So you're getting me thinking now.
Absolutely.
What age should someone think about? Even, I know there's a standard will, but then even a legacy will. Is that something that you would do and then maybe update again a few years later?
Yeah, no, that would be so wonderful. That would be ideal if we would write these maybe at landmark times in our life, celebrations, marriages, births, upon the death, something so big as, your parent passing, and you reflect in their life as well as your own. It would be wonderful if we were to do that. Sadly, people don't even write one. So if we wrote it at one time in our life, it would be wonderful. If we updated, that would just be icing on the cake. But if we and Kieran, I have to say, I've thought about, even just the tragedy. I've been to wakes for young people have passed. Someone had that awful, high school, they didn't realize they had a heart condition, they're on the football field, or, things happen at every stage of our life. We never know if we're coming back from that business trip. And have we told our children what we hope we get to tell them on their wedding day or their graduation day? So there's no bad time. In fact, I think anyone, I've taught, I teach this class once a year to Embry-Riddle. It's an aeronautical university in Arizona. And those students are anywhere from 19, to their mid-20s. They have such valuable reflection on their lives. And I think one of the good things about our self-revelatory social media world is that what we would have locked up in diaries, a couple of generations ago. Now we are a little bit more prepared to share. And that's not all bad, because sharing means that we have done some self-reflection, and that maybe we take something that seems very dark and we air it and hold it up to the light, and maybe there is a little bit of healing there. So there's no bad time. The reality is most people are ready for this when they have the time, when their heads down, homesteading, raising their children. They're not taking any time to themselves. So maybe if the children are off to college and you have a little bit more time, you're now at the stage of your life where you really can reflect, and your children are maybe getting ready for marriages and graduation and going out into the world, and you want to think about what wisdom it has that you might want to leave them. But no bad time to do it. And if you update it over the decades, even better. But even just one would be better than none.
Incredible. And I'm sure you've seen, as you mentioned, so many people don't even consider ordinary wills. I'm sure you've seen some really big problems, even with well-written wills. I can imagine then if even less people are leaving their story, there's a lot of missed knowledge and sharing that we don't even know that we're missing. As I say, you've got me thinking today, and I would never have thought of this before, to be honest.
Yeah, and they say when an elder dies, a library is lost. So there's so much wisdom and stories that we could glean. And one of the things we've lost with the extended family, I told you about, we had that elderly aunt living in our home. Those people who told the stories, that gave them some value in the home. I mean, not only were they able to help the younger mother with the children and the wisdom and how to get through the teething and what have you, they were there. They had a function as the valued storytellers and the story keepers, and even that, because we're not living with our grandparents, we're much less likely to ask them about their lives, and they don't have the opportunity to tell us about the war and the shortages and the rationing and all of the things that our elders were able to tell us, and that gave them a value. So it's just such an all-round winning situation for every generation if we share and pass on our stories and what we learn from them. And there is the secret. This is the difference of a legacy letter from a memoir or a family history. It's not just the stories, it's what the lessons from those stories are, the message, your take on life, what it is that you feel this big old experience that you've lived through has been all about. There's the kernel, the wisdom, the nugget of it all.
When you mentioned the stories that you heard, like the fairy forts and I guess you're making me think now again back to the stories I heard, like Banshees, the stories, and children today now it's all Peppa Pig and Paw Patrol. So it's totally different. As you say, the history and the stories are going and disappearing. And I'm definitely, you've prompted me now. Definitely, I'm going to be doing a little bit of digging on Irish history, but it's a pity that there's no family stories to pass on and to share in that respect. In when people are sharing their legacy, then you're mentioning that it's actually the lessons. Are they compiling a big document, or is it stories and then a lesson, or is there a format that someone should really follow?
Very much a format, and there's the key to getting it done. Because when people sit down to write their legacy letter, they're going to get lost. I had a little man in Aurora tell me one time, I can never get past the war. So there is the program that I put together. Probably the most important thing is the internal architecture. So I tell people how to start Dear, how to dedicate it, how to write the first paragraph. And here's something that's really, really important. I say you can only write for half a page and only write for 15 minutes. You can only write in the next section for 2 pages and half an hour. The reason I do that is that they are going to go spend their whole 20 pages on their first job or their first child or their first Christmas, and they're not going to get through to the other sections. So I've taught this often in a weekend format because it is about a 10-hour program. And I just keep moving them through the sections. So we start off with the dedication. your life and times, a few family stories to get the juices flowing, and always, always, always pulling out the message. Why do you remember that? Why is it important? Why does it stand out after all these years? Then we go into the difficult times, what we've lived through. And here I often find the most difficult part to write, but the deepest lessons, the most valuable kernels come out as we write through difficult times. Kieran, and I do say to my audiences, if it is too hard, if something is just too hard and has been a secret for so long that you can't write it for your general family, have a little secret compartment, maybe for that person's eyes only. Tell them why something happened, apologize, ask for forgiveness, maybe give somebody else forgiveness for something they've done unto you. But the whole point is healing. And I encourage people not to do any finger pointing or, venting, that it really, we hope this is going to be healing for everyone. Then we move through the heart of the ethical will, which is, what did your life mean? What are your values? And I give people loads and loads of lists to pick from, examples to pick from. And for everything I ask my writers to write, I give them an example from people who have written one over the years and given me the permission to share, so that you're never just staring at a blank page. We go through, so now what are maybe 3 values that are meaningful to you? Is it faith? Is it family? Was it shelter? Was it education? Was it travel? Was it mission? Was it serving? And a story to illustrate that, because the story carries the message. Then we move on to what you're most proud of, what you've accomplished, what you want to be remembered for. And then I encourage people throughout, every time something bubbles into your head that doesn't belong in that section, jot it down in a separate section. And then we have like a little potpourri section where we just, throw down all the little kernels, even if it didn't fit into one particular place. We talk about how the writing made you feel. And then how to write, how you want to be remembered, a final section, and even how to finish it off. So it's extremely structured while you're writing it. But when you're finished the process and you take away the titles and write it down as one flowing, seamless whole document, it all fits together. So the internal, as I say, the hidden architecture is what makes this process work so well. So it looks like a very kind of gentle meander through your life with your stories and your lessons. It looks effortless, but really there has gone a lot of thought into what we put in that particular letter, and who you are just rises from the pages, rises from the memories. Doesn't have to be a big full memoir. And to be quite honest, in the TikTok world, we're probably not getting our grandchildren's attention for a full memoir, but we will get their attention for this one letter. I had one gentleman who said even the teenagers left down their phones when he was reading his legacy letter to the family. And there's another little thing here, and people write this and they don't want to wait till they're gone. They don't want this to be something read at their funeral. They want to share it right away. And there's a lot of value in sharing right away also, because you've kind of looked at your life and what it meant, and that's a little inspirational guide for you going forward. And it can bring you closer to your children. I've had people tell me that they had no idea what their parent went through. They didn't know why their father never talked about his childhood, because it was so awful and so poor. They didn't know that a father, they just thought of him as an absent father, but he was gone all the time because he worked so hard, because his own father did not provide for that family. So there's a lot of understanding and healing and bridge building through this kind of sharing, and the process even of sitting with maybe a parent in hospice as they tell their stories. And there's a closeness through that process that we may not have had the tools to reach our parent, because it can be hard. There can be, a chasm, and stories can often bridge it.
Incredible. No, it's actually the layout is absolutely brilliant. And I guess from sitting with your clients and helping them with their formal will, you've seen or you've heard the stories and you realize what's been missed and what's not been put down or placed into the document. So you mentioned that there could be the range in size. What would be a standard? Is it 5 pages, 10 pages, or it just depends per person?
15 to 20, 15 to 20. And it's really, because I said it's a very, very structured process that I teach. I'm literally limiting them to a half page here, 2 pages there, 1 page here. And then the variation really does between 15 and 20 pages comes in that where I said that kind of the popcorn popping, the fireworks in that one section that's kind of firing in anything that popped into your mind. And that can be the variation, but because of the structure, it's 15 to 20 pages and very, very doable and readable. And it just doesn't get lost in any one section or another. Now, if someone has found the process so healing or so interesting, they want to go back in and develop any one of those sections, write more stories, go into greater depth. Of course they can afterwards, but afterwards, not during, because we don't want this. I know too well what's going to happen if someone decides, no, I want to keep writing for my entire weekend on this one section. That's all that's going to get written when they go back home again. So, there's a lot of wisdom gone into, a lot of research gone into getting this short letter written before you start attempting anything deeper.
And I can imagine so many people are probably dreading having to sit down and actually do their own formal will. But the process of doing an ethical will actually sounds quite exciting. As you say, it can maybe do a little bit of healing for the person as well, let them get some things off their chest and maybe go back in their own mind and history and reflect on their own life. So it does actually sound quite an interesting process of, I'd say I'll call it self-healing, but maybe you have a different phrase for it. But I can imagine that do people feel relieved then when they've completed their legacy document?
Absolutely, they love it. We always have tears. We would never get through, because I have a sharing circle. So I have a sharing circle that's on Facebook as part of Share My Legacy's offerings. But when I teach this workshop in person, no one has any obligation to share, but they often want to share. We sit around, everybody reads sections of their letter. We all cry because your life is so emotional and so beautiful. Even the most broken parts, to share that you have visited it, that you have wanted to share it with your family, you've gleaned from that, how it made you stronger, how you stood up in your shoes after your losses, what you rebuilt from your worn out tools. I cannot even describe to you how deep and valuable this process for the people who write it. They absolutely love it. They love it and they can't wait to share it. And this has been probably the greatest branding tool. And that's not why I started out. I never intended, now how can I separate my law office from others? And how can I brand myself with storytelling? But that's exactly what happened. Because already coming from Ireland, and we do have that storytelling tradition, and estate planning is such an intimate area of practice that when I encourage them to write this, I always give them my program as part of their estate plan. And when they see that I consider their story as important as their legal documents, and that the process is not just about fees, they become my clients for life. They tell their friends and their family and their neighbors and the people in the church that my office is where they want to go to get their estate plan done. So it has really been a beautiful success story for me in many ways.
Incredible. And you mentioned that people are becoming more comfortable sharing, I guess, and this is a driver from social media. So traditionally in family, we would have been very private, and you try not to be talking about keep the gossip on the stories.
Say nothing to hear more.
Yeah, that is as low key as you possibly can. But this is actually a little flip on that, and I guess as you mentioned, social media is maybe even helping that we want to tell the stories, and we should be proud and shout from a high place about what we've done and what our journeys have been like. Do you think that's something of part of the experience?
I think that's some value to be gleaned from where we're at with that experience. And there's a lot of negativity. Adults are often very just very pessimistic about our youth and how much time they spend on screens, and the damage that social media can do. And while there is, that's real, I think we can look at the positive side of social media and the sharing, and from teaching, not just in that university, but also I've taught this in my son's high school. I can see that children are more able to reflect and a little bit more willing to share than my generation. We would have clammed right up if someone asked us how we felt about a particular thing that happened in our lives. So I think maybe we have a more confident generation now. They're more encouraged maybe to show and tell from they're in the little preschools. But I think there's a lot, and I have four. My oldest boy is 20. I have a 19-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 12-year-old. So I see their world, and I think there's a lot that's positive about it, as well as the dangers of the social pressure and some of the negativity that they're exposed to through social media. So I am an optimist, and I'm always looking for the bright side, and we can always find it.
No, for sure, and that'll be part of their legacy in time to come as well. But if someone wants to find out more about creating their own legacy and the service that you offer, which is Share My Legacy, where's the best place for them to do that, or how can they get in touch?
ShareMyLegacy.com.
Brilliant. Excellent.
ShareMyLegacy.com. My law office is KerlinWalshLaw.com, but which will lead you to Share My Legacy. But for your audience in Ireland and the UK, it would be ShareMyLegacy.com.
Incredible, amazing, excellent. We'll have a link underneath this video, so if anyone wants to visit, then hopefully they'll click through and maybe find out more about sharing their legacy and their ethical will, as opposed to a formal standard or traditional will. So again, Eileen, thank you very much for your time today. Really, really insightful, and you've got me thinking about loads of things now. So quite an amazing product and service that you offer, and helping people, I guess, document and their life, but also feel better and maybe at ease at some of the things that happened in their journey as well. So I think it's a great service. So thank you for sharing that today.
You're welcome, Kieran, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Brilliant, excellent. And thank you for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed today's video. And of course, if you want to find out more about creating your own ethical will, then definitely click on the link, go visit Share My Legacy and say hello to Eileen, and find out more about what they're doing in sunny Chicago, I think it is. So, and do please share the video on your social media, and we'll see you in the next one. So thank you.